So before we get into like new stuff, I want to share with you some recommendations for books, which I have a ton of them with me right here. One of the things that you'll definitely want to get moving forward is either the Ravi Ching, the complete Ravi Ching, which you can get this on Amazon. I think it's more expensive there. I would go to humandesignamerica.com. The other recommendation, which this one is the complete Ravi Ching. So it goes into all the gates and it tells you about the crosses a little bit and like what channel it's part of. And it has a little bit more information than this book. This is the very first book. This is called the Black Book. It's the very first human design book ever written. Again, Human Design America, I think it's like $30. And I would recommend this or this. This one has the Ravi Ching Index, which goes into all the gates. So it has this in it. And it also has a little bit more about like an intro about human design. It doesn't go into types or authorities, but it tells you a little bit more about like the beginning of the universe, which we're going to be going into. So there is like some cosmology in here. And it's really cool because in the back of the book, it talks about juxtaposition unified theory, which explains a lot about time and the dimensions and trying to solve the issue that, Einstein had with his theory of relativity, because it doesn't really solve the problem of time. So this has like a little section in the back here that explains that. We will be going through it, but I would recommend this book. It's pretty good because as we're going to go through, you're going to want to have the index for gates that you want to look up. We're going to be going into specific mechanisms, but you're going to want to have like these references available. I use this other book, which is more expensive, but it's called The Line Companion. And this book goes into all of the lines, right? All the gates, all the lines, all of that. So what I do is I highlight. I know, Alex, you don't really like to highlight in books, but I love to. And what I do is I put the highlighted information into documents, which I think I've shown you guys in the Google Docs. You don't necessarily have to do that. I am going to send you some like blank graphs and little worksheets so that as we move along, you can like make copies of them and say 1 week we're focusing on your Mercury, right? We're going to talk about each planet. Because the planets definitely have an effect on it. They make a difference as to, okay, I have the gate 62, but it's my moon. What does that mean? We can look in the astrology chart. Well, what house is it in? What sign? And start to really pull all of this together. Before we go into all that, we're going to be diving next into all the centers, right? So right now, you should be able to identify your type, your strategy, your authority, what centers you have defined, what centers you have undefined, your bridges, right? Like what type of definition are you? Are you a single definition, a split, a triple split, a quadruple split, no definition? You should be able to identify those bridges, right? If you are a split. And eventually we're going to be getting into tracking certain planets so that you can learn that feeling from that planet based on your hanging gates. Okay, so hanging gates are where you have like a defined center, but it's just hanging there, right? This gate is pointing to like an open center. So as an example, right? It's backwards. Okay, so this one here, the 41, if the 30 was active by say the moon, I could take that day to really contemplate what that is, right? And I can look in my indexes and look at that, right? So these are the human design books that I recommend. There are some other ones. We're going to be diving into everything in the classes, so you'll get a lot of information. You don't have to, but I definitely recommend getting at least the Ravi Ching. And if you want to go balls to the wall, get the Line Companion. We know that this is the syncretist society, right? So it's not just human design. even though we've been focusing a lot on that. Obviously, everyone should have the Gene Keys book as well, right? So if you don't have it, and let's say you're in like another country and you can't get it, they have a digital version. At least get that. They also have an audio version, but I like having a physical book, which mine I've had for years and it's falling apart. So yeah, oops, I think I just broke it more. All right, great. So that one's good. And then we will put up a link on the website, the activation sequence, right? So don't get overwhelmed. I'm not trying to overwhelm you guys with like, get 100 books, but these are things if you want to get them. The activation sequence, we know, is the prime codes, right? It's your 4 prime codes, your sun and earth and your sun and earth, right? So that's your cross. And we know that this is 70% of the neutrinos that you're receiving, right? So when you look at it from a Gene Keys standpoint, it's going to go over your challenges, like your biggest challenge, which is between the personality, sun and earth. So we're going to start to see the juxtaposition of these planets, right? The gates, the angles that the information is coming in is creating these different pathways. It shows you your breakthrough path, how to break through from your challenges, which is from your personality earth over to your design sun. And then how you get your core stability in life, which is that other side, the design side, the sun and earth, right? So it's these 4 codes, right? Your top 4. I'd recommend those books for the Gene Keys. There are also some free Gene Keys courses on the Gene Keys website. I have at least 2 people that are coming into the Syncretist Society that are going to be focusing on teaching the Gene Keys. So we'll get some courses and stuff coming in for that. Last part here is 2 more things. The I Ching, right? I have a couple of I Ching books. You can get any of them, right? Any kind of I Ching book that you might resonate with. I have the Toltec I Ching. This is kind of the classic complete I Ching. And then I have the Tao, which correlates the DNA. These are also very interesting books because basically, let's say that we're focusing 1 week on like the 40th code. You can look it up in this book, you know, and get information. It even goes through the lines, look at it in the Gene Keys, because eventually we're going to be getting into each gate. And we want to look at all these different aspects so that as we contemplate together, we're able to kind of pull lots of different things. And depending on each one of our unique filtering, our unique codes, we're going to come up with different things, right? And different ways to explain it. And we'll be able to relate it to our own chart. Eventually, we're also going to get into the stellar background field, right? Which is what created this neutrino ocean. This one is the asteroid goddess, right? This one's really cool. Talks about all the asteroids, star myths, also pretty cool. Anything you gravitate towards, star lore and star names, right? So this is more about like the mythology and all of that, because it's really interesting. You know, we have like billions and probably trillions, like infinite amount of stars in our ocean, right? So even though we believe like, okay, like in astrology, they take the 12 directions, right, of where that information is coming from, the zodiac. And then human design divides that down into the I Ching hexagrams, right? The 64 gates in the wheel. And then that goes down into 384 lines. So, and then there's quite a bit more that it goes down to the color, tone, and base, which is pretty advanced. So we think that it's like, oh, wow, this is really like a narrow gate, like a narrow pathway for that information to come through. But when you think about how vast, you know, the ocean is and the field is, there's like tons of information coming through. All right, last book, I think here, Cosmos and Psyche. This guy's awesome, Richard Tarnas. He wrote another book that I have as well, Passions of the Western Mind. And what he did, he wrote this Passions of the Western Mind which is like the development of the psyche over, the different events that happen. And then in this book, he correlates the outer planets to how the psyche developed, right? Because these outer external planets have very long cycles. So Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, whenever they come together or make an opposition or a square, right? A conjunction, there's a lot of like really interesting world events that happen. And we can kind of start to see how these bigger movements are like the cogs in the wheel, the machine, all these different gates in the program are always opening, right? And we know that the planets are the filters. So we can start to see how all of that relates.